friends of mine in New York City with something called OccuPrint. If you Google it, they have phenomenal hundreds of really super cool posters from occupies all over the world, all downloadable. They have a group of May Day posters. They raised huge amounts of money to print these 2 May Day posters. And I personally love this slogan. May Day, no work, no school, no housework, no shopping, no banking. It's a day without the 99%. That's kind of the Occupy Wall Street May Day call. If different people from different occupies take 1 or 2 of these, then you can either give me your email or write to OccuPrint, and they said they will mail a bunch of posters to other people. They just sent like 2,000 affiliates for me because I couldn't get them there. So, and now we're blanketing our city with them. So if you want either of those, and I'm part of this project where we're doing these little pamphlets. Sorry, this is my like constant agitation of getting literature out. I'm part of a thing called the Institute for Anarchist Studies, and we're going to eventually have 2 or 3 dozen of these. But they're 2,000-word descriptions. It's called the Lexicon series, and each one takes 1 word and, in a very open way, try to get at it. So please, if you're from different Occupy sites, I only have 100 of them. Take like a few to your Occupy, and then I can give you the PDF site, or I don't know that we personally have the capacity to mail them out, but I'm just trying to get them out as widely as possible. And maybe I'll be able to mail some more to a central location in the South if people want them. Particularly, I mean, the first 5 are colonialism, gender, anarchism, white supremacy, and power, and it's only because those are the ones that got written first. But there's going to be a whole bunch more. And just before we start, I want to point to one on power I think is really interesting. For instance, it talks about power as both a positive and negative, like our own power to make decisions, but when power over being a problem. And it talks about power as institutional structures or power dynamics between people. So we're trying to problematize ways we think about work in good ways. But okay. So who wants to maybe start with just maybe briefly just say here's my kind of longer term vision, and then for a minute or so just talk about maybe a interesting novel strategy about how we might get there. And I actually like if everyone's going to be shy to do it first. Okay, maybe 1 or 2 people could raise their hands and do it, and then we'll do another set of raising hands, because I think it's nice that people listen. I think one thing when everybody's raised their hands, we're too busy raising our hands to listen. So 1, 2, 3, and then nobody raise their hand, and then we'll do it again.
I mean, very basically, using the structure of, looking at the goals that we presented as a group, I look at 4 things as being like the basic ways to get there. And some people don't agree with some of them, but I think they're all important. One is the basic concept of dual power, which is basically building the society we want to rival the structure of society that already exists. And that doesn't have to be, I mean, if we can, it would be great to be able to do that entirely and build our own society that's separated from everything, but it can just be on single issues, too. Think about, if you think schools should be free, start your own free school. It's a great idea. Or Wikipedia, something like that, where it's completely free, anyone can participate. Incrementalism is the second thing, which I think is important, although not everyone does. I think moving politics to the left in general to lessen the ability of those in power already to propagandize, and also to do real good for real people. And if we were able to convince our government, like governments in Europe have, like people in Europe have, to have universal health care, that does real good for real people. The third thing is education in general. That means in your personal lives, don't be afraid to talk to everyone about these things. Always proselytize for goodness in your life in general, and alternative media to get around corporate mass media. And the fourth thing is focus especially on local issues, because a lot of us as individual occupies can't have a huge effect on national politics or do things on a huge scale, but we can have a significant effect on local things. So that's
if you want to say their names too, sorry.
In traveling, I think the school thing comes up a lot, and so a lot of us want to occupy the schools and kind of show by example what we think a school should look like, and that's teaching what children do naturally, and building on that, and then building science and math and everything into that they want to come to school and they want to learn whatever the school looks like, but more hands-on, more information to younger kids, and not using a template to teach everybody. So in that, there have been probably 7 teachers who are willing to pack up and just move to wherever we can occupy a school. So that's been sort of our focus. And the other thing too, what Adam said.
Can you explain that how that works?
Well, they're fed up with the education system too. The teachers don't like it. No Child Left Behind was a disaster. I think.
No, can you explain just the strategy, a bunch of teachers going somewhere, does that actually happen anywhere?
Yeah, we're gonna build a city. I don't know if people know this, but Jeff Fresco lives in Florida, but not many people know that he has a moneyless figure-based society right here happening. And so we toured it and loved it, and we thought, well, why can't we build something like this? So I put it on Facebook. Somebody wrote back and said, I've got 5 acres in Colorado if you want to build it. And so we're like, well, let's get shit done, you know, let's stop talking about it and start doing some stuff. So anyway, that's the plan, is we're going to start a community. But if anybody should look up Venus Project, which is here, that is about little houses that you use and you don't own and you just can move around. It's an amazing thing. It's in Venus, right here in Florida.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. If you don't know me already, I'm Jasmine. My goal for this, what we're continuing goal right now, is to see what the people in our area want and act on it. The plan is, what our strategy is, we're actually doing right now is canvassing. Going from one end of our city to the other end of our city. We're working within government right now. We're doing a people's budget plan to make sure people in our city have a say in how we spend our money. We're also doing different community education events to get people to come out and see the different issues that we're having right now. What do you think about it? What do you want to do about it? And what can we do to help you with it? Which is pretty much what our strategy is, rock fighting.
I think I'll just have keep doing this with people talking about what they're doing, and then maybe we can come back and throw out ideas across some of them when we hear some more. Does that seem? Another few hands? Okay, go ahead, Noel.
Okay. Thinking about what you said, that without public land, we have nothing. That's our primary need. And also, I think as a movement to go forward, we need to engage the 1% and welcome them. We need people with a lot of money to buy public land. And the way to do that is with land conservation and land trusts. We have a really good one in Alachua County, which is the county that is home to Gainesville, ACT, Alachua Conservation Trust, and a lot of wonderful people contribute to it. A lot of times they'll put it in their will, like when I die, all my money will go into buying public land. And when that happens, it's a nonprofit, so it has a board of directors. They are pretty transparent with their voting, and they collect this money, they look for green spaces, they buy them, they make trails, they make them into areas where people can go and enjoy, and that's what makes Gainesville a really awesome place to live. So I think it's a great model, and I think a media campaign to engage the 1% to join us in this makes them welcome. So.
Great. And I just want to talk about if people haven't heard of the Brazilian landless movement, to look into it. It's not land trust, but another apparently using the land for 25 years, and I think there's 2.5 million people involved, and they have taken over big swaths of land, have whole school systems, and just interesting, like when you start out, like just connecting how people think. So I love that thinking of this. I really appreciate that people are also doing transitional, like what we can do from right now.
I had just one more piece. That one piece of land that they've purchased, they always do a conservation easement on whatever they purchase. One, they allowed a swath of it to have agricultural easement, so there's now community gardens on public land.
Anyone else?
I don't know if I'm quite ready to call it a goal, but I've definitely been thinking a lot lately about how society would look and operate if it's not focused around. I think somebody already did throw out money as something to try and get away from, and a lot of that comes down to things that you can really do in your daily life. So expanding
extraction of resources and water and mining and all that stuff. So in particular, I would like to see talk of more blockades or occupations that incorporate targeting key infrastructure for large-scale industrial economy, like in particular energy-type sites. I think it would be good to see a renewal of that. We know some of the tactics and strategies that we've seen used in the past, Earth First style actions. We'll be talking more about it tomorrow, but something I'd like to see.
What time is that tomorrow?
Tomorrow we're at 10:30, I think, in the morning.
Okay. And 10:30. I also want to point out, like in the other regard, people have also thought of Zapatista Communities did this, but a friend of mine who lives in Detroit right now, sort of combining those two ideas, and it's an absurd idea which may make absolutely no sense and be awful, but she's been living there for a long time, and she's like, Detroit has, I think there's only like 300,000 people live there, and it was 1.5 million. If you've been in Detroit, it's basically like there's fox running through the city, it's rewilding, there's abandoned houses, there's plenty, and there's nothing. I mean, there's no police just down the street, there's no buses, there's no nothing. It's really intense. But so she was like, what if, as a thought, she goes, what if we decided to just do the whole city as like, just take over the whole city, buy the whole city, which you could, as an experiment, and also like combine what would look like to transform a city that we have control over the whole city, that we also think about it ecologically. And I was like, well, what a brilliant experiment. Like, I don't know if they can do it, but I just saw her a couple weeks ago, and she was like, that's what I want to do. Experiment in one city right now that's been devastated, is almost a poster child for how destroyed capitalism has been due to racism, etc., and bring an ecological. So she talked about, for instance, what would it look like to supply water in an ecological way in a municipality to who's ever in that, including, non-human. What would that look like, for instance, as an experiment on a large scale? And, so interesting ways besides shutting down is like, how do we think about actually doing things ecologically in a way besides just shutting down? Okay, so another couple people. Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I think it's really important for us to not just think about an alternative way of life or an alternative economy, but actually making that possible and creating an alternative system where people can opt out of capitalism is, I think a lot of times we've just been focusing on like destroying or deconstructing capitalism as opposed to actually working on creating a different system where we don't have to have jobs, where we don't have to use money, where we don't have to feed the system that we don't agree with. Oh, and point of information is that in Detroit they have some occupied houses, so.
She was just like, I thought it was, she's like, instead of a little piecemeal, what would it look like to think about experimenting on that level? I mean, that's why kind of like right now, she's like, anything could happen in this time period, why don't we try something wild and bold? Lately I've been all about that. I'm like, let's do something as wild and bold as we can.
There's actually a city in Ohio that someone from Occupying Ohio is trying to get people to move out there, and it's kind of a smaller town. They have a lot of abandoned buildings, and as long as you pay the property taxes, the city will just give it to you.
Wow.
Where's that?
It's somewhere in Ohio.
Of course, the other questions that are complex are who lives in those, Detroit, like, clearly is a complex, or that city is like who lives there. All these things are complex and messy, but it's still an interesting time to just think. I actually want to point out another really good book which you reminded me of. I totally am madly in love with this author. John Holloway wrote a book called Crack Capitalism, which is way too expensive because he produced it on something called Pluto Press, so buy one copy and copy it, and I doubt he'd care. But he gave a really, really lovely talk at Left Forum in New York City about a week ago, and I know it's on YouTube and stuff, and he wrote a book called Crack Capitalism, and it's a pun that we need to destroy capitalism, but he said the way we do that is by finding the cracks in it and pushing out, and the way is that, in a way he talks about you, is like, he's like not opting out, he's what capitalism takes from us. It's a beautifully written, it's so accessible, and he's like, what it takes from us is we forget that we can do things, and so he's like, part of it is doing, like as a verb, and when we start doing, capitalism takes our doing, commodifies it, sells it, and so we're not really anymore. So it's a beautiful book in which he talks about ways in which us beginning to push out, us redoing things again, and that's actually getting at what capitalism takes from us. And the second thing that he says, I think, is brilliant, that the capitalism takes from us, so it's about self-determination. But he also says that it can try a politics of dignity that destroys our dignity. And what he means by dignity is looking at people as not things to be bought and sold, and like we are part of capitalism, but looking at each person as, not that we like everybody, but as very distinct, or that we like every living being. But looking at nature and humans, and we're part of nature, everything as inherently worthwhile. So dignity being this way in which we see the world as having value in itself, not for something else. And that gets at the heart of what capitalism does. It's only if something else is selling it. So it's a beautiful book. It's also in the same way it offers really interesting ideas about how to get somewhere else. So, okay, other people. Sure. anyone else want to share something? We can also stop Zoom. Oh, go ahead.
So, I don't know, free education, but I don't just mean like college, more of like spreading these ideas and having discussions happen in different places and like how to do that. And like, so I'm just thinking, you know, going into a neighborhood and showing a film on the side of a building, or Whitney told me about like this game, Just Two Dice, like patriarchy and you know, another, like, fucking whatever. Something on the other one, and rolling them and then being like, okay, so they relate in this way, and just like, bust out, hey, roll these dice, and like, what do you think about that? And just like more public workshops or discussions in different places, or in the parking lot of a Walmart, I don't know, just like, or when you're at a bar going and like trying to get people to just like going out and sparking conversation. Introduction.
So food is a common bond that connects us all. It literally makes the common man just as important as like the greater man. We all have to eat at any given time. And our industrial agriculture model is rather one of the more complex contributors to the slow degradation of our ecology. So personally, I'd like to see as a goal would be for more people in local bioregions to learn that they have the power to produce their food in a much more sound ecologic manner, and that we need to move away from these monocultures where we just continuously grow one sort of soil. And I've always liked to think of the industrial model as plants being kept on like a synthetic machine. They're not even alive at that point. They're nutritiously dead and they're cellularly dead at that point, as well as the mass amounts of earthworms and other beneficial insects and microbes that are destroyed in this process. So I personally like to see our goal more so focus on putting the power back in the local hands, because like I said, it is that common bond, and you know, everyone's got to eat, so they got to sit at a table and deal with each other.
Another interesting thing about this historical moment, I really think we have such profound power right now, social and political, and like in every way we have power. I don't think we even realize how much power we have. And it creates a space where other people think they can self-organize and they don't have to use Occupy, which is great. I think this is funny tension where I'm like, they're not Occupy, why are they doing that? And it's like, that's great, you know, it's like everyone's inspired. But it's also in which, when you talk about food, the pushback of, again, recriminalization of, we were talking about crime earlier, of sharing food in public. There's a whole bunch of cities, again, or, you know, from Food Not Bombs, but just all sorts of food sharing is being criminalized again. So there's a way in which that has been a goal of a lot of people to push out food self-sufficiency, food sovereignty, food sharing, food equality, you know, all the terms we could think of to think of, you know, and there's a pushback, okay? So which makes me want to point out when we have goals and we call it strategies, is being flexible in those strategies, because they're more flexible than, they're super flexible, everything we do, which is another reason we don't want to keep doing the same thing, because we always get outwitted, so we have to keep outsmarting and outwitting and out-organizing. So, yeah, but it also just shows we have power. I'm always like, great, they're starting to criminalize food, it's horrible, but it means we're actually winning, because they're actually trying to do something to shut us down.
I have a slightly embarrassing goal a little bit, but I'm going to throw it out there because I just started thinking about it. But in the way that movie V for Vendetta seemed to like inspire some of the messaging, and I think some of like the militancy or, you know, ambitiousness in Occupy Wall Street, I'm curious to see if any of the pop culture symbolism out of the Hunger Games can what that's going to result in the next couple months or year. Just because I just spoke yesterday to a group of 40 kids, like middle school age kids, and they were so amped up about the rebellion in Hunger Games. I was talking about ecology, and they were really into making those connections, and so I've been curious about where that could, you know, as far as what pop culture has to offer rebellion, where that might go.
Explain Hunger Games.
Hunger Games is an incredible trilogy, like book series of young adult fiction. It's kind of classic story, but it's got like a really